Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Now, each week we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by a remarkable guest, Brandon Welch, who is founder and CEO of Doxy.me. Hello, Brandon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good. That's what we like to hear. So before we begin, could you just tell a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
Yeah, so I'm Brandon Welch. I'm the founder and CEO of Doxy.me. I actually started Doxy.me while I was a PhD student over 10 years ago, trying to find a simple and free option for doctors to see patients by video, because everything at the time was expensive and complicated to use, as all those Polycom and Cisco systems that required hardware and thousands of dollars. And we were just a poor little study group. We're actually trying to get pregnant moms to see their doctor by video instead of having to drive in for care. And they didn't have much money to fund this, but we originally wanted to use Skype or FaceTime, but it's not HIPAA compliant. HIPAA is the data privacy law in the United States. And so I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, either really expensive, complicated systems like Cisco and Polycom, or solutions that were free and simple, but not HIPAA compliant, like FaceTime and Skype. And so I was like, there's got to be a way to bring these two together. And so that was the problem that started Doxy.me. And it was kind of a side project while I was a student, and I was working on it, getting student funding and grants to pay for it. And by the time I graduated, as a fully built out product that we just released to the world and said, we'll see what happens. And so that's how it started. And for the first 6 years, from 2014 until 2020, when COVID hit, it was a side thing for me. And I was a professor at the local medical university. But then when COVID hit, the world turned to telemedicine. And because Doxy.me was simple and free and easy to use, we had hundreds of thousands of providers come over and sign up for Doxy.me. Today, there's over 1 million providers who use Doxy.me. We're in 176 countries, and we've facilitated over 9 billion minutes of telemedicine.
Fantastic. And what's the reason for the company name?
Doxy.me, it's spelled DOXY.ME, but phonetically it's pronounced Doxy.me, like the doctor sees me. So it's a little play on words.
Rather ingenious name for a company. So were you always going to be an entrepreneur? Was it something in your blood, or was it something that you just stumbled upon?
Yeah, it's interesting. I come from a family of business owners, and my dad owned an insurance agency, and he started a tax business. And my grandfather, he did businesses and an investment fund and stuff like that. And so I come from a line of business people. I was kind of the weird one when I went to college. I said I was going to study science, and I went and did a degree in biology and a degree in genetics. But I always had kind of an entrepreneurial knack. And so even though I went into science, I was always like attracted to leading, innovating, and coming up with ideas. I just really wanted to apply. I was more interested in like science and genetics than I was in insurance and mortgages. And so I kind of followed my passion of going into healthcare and science and technology, but I still had that like entrepreneurial gene that I was kind of raised with, that's in my family. And I ended up merging the two. And so now I run a health technology business. And I think I always kind of had that knack and the desire to be an entrepreneur. But I guess in a different field. I was kind of bored by the typical science type professions, or being a doctor. It was kind of like, I just felt like a cog in a machine, where being an entrepreneur feels, it fulfills my creative side, or the desire to go create, do things, be strategic. And I love that. That's kind of my passion. I just, with my background in training and education, I'm able to apply that skill into a field that typically doesn't have very many entrepreneurs. And so it's really good marriage.
And do you have to wear a lot of hats in your job, or are you more of a specialist in one particular area?
I do have to wear a lot of hats. I wish I could be a specialist at times, because I love doing design and user experience, and I could spend all day just doing layouts and understanding the user workflows and designing things. I just really love it. But one, there's people better at doing that than me. And so you hire them and do that for them to do that. But then as a leader, as a CEO, you kind of have to, you're kind of captain of the ship, and you have to make sure that everybody's working in their own areas or doing the right thing, working well together, jumping in to bring teams together if there's conflict or if there's inefficiencies. And so I get the privilege of being able to look over everything and make sure everything's going well and jump in when I need to, and happy to do that. And I think that's also where my skill is as well. There's some areas of business, finance, I'm not terribly skilled or even trained at, but I have to understand it, and I kind of like do it because that's part of my job. But there's definitely certain areas that I enjoy more, that I'm more attracted to working on. But it's my job as a CEO to lead and to be aware of everything and keep everybody in order, working together so the ship is running as effectively as possible.
So I love that ship analogy and you being a captain of it. Has it been plain sailing, or has it been a lot of stormy seas?
No business is ever smooth sailing. There's always stormy seas, and that's the fun and joy of being an entrepreneur. Yeah, I mean, from the start, we've been a company for over 10 years now, and the first couple of years is very much like, how are we going to pay the bills, and are we going to even survive, to a legal battle with some angel investors that came to support us and fighting that. So we had a legal battle going on and still growing and navigating that. And then COVID comes, and that was a huge tsunami. Fortunately, it didn't capsize us, but it gave us a huge push into where we're at today. But there have been other things. We had 6 people before COVID, 6 employees, and we had to grow to 120 in a couple months. And so managing organizational change and hiring and bringing in the right people and exiting the wrong people and navigating all that. We have several employees who are based in Ukraine. And so when the Ukrainian war started, we had to navigate that and help them. And as we've brought in more people, the original technology we were built on is 8-10 years old, and we've got to upgrade it in order to do the things we want to do and go where we want to go. And that requires an entire refactoring of the code base. So that brings a whole new set of challenges, bringing in people, engineers who can do that and build for the future and have the organizational processes in place that can do that. And so there's always challenges, and it's just being ready for the next challenge. And the challenge could be something that disrupts you, like AI for many businesses is disrupting them, or it could be something that could catapult you. Like COVID was very disruptive to a lot of businesses, but it's very beneficial to us. And so there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be storms, but sometimes you can use those storms to your advantage. And it's just a matter of knowing what type of storm is this? Is this a capsizing storm, or is this a thrusting storm? And sometimes you can turn a negative into a positive. And so knowing how to navigate that.
So you mentioned AI there. So it'd be interesting now to just get your thoughts on AI, especially in your particular field. What do you think the future impact will be? And is it already having a massive impact on you at the moment?
In the clinical space, doctors, therapists, counselors, they're 5 to 10 years behind the times. And so we're not stressing too much about where AI is going in healthcare. We're going to enable it. We're going to support it. But doctors are very conservative when it comes to adopting new technology. They were thrust into telemedicine because of COVID. Telemedicine was available for a decade before, but they were pretty resistant to adopt it until they were forced to. And so unless there's a forcing function with AI, I think it's going to be a slow adoption for AI in the healthcare space. But that doesn't mean we're ignoring it. But it's not something that we are necessarily worried that's going to turn us upside down either. In fact, we're looking at it as it's going to be a slow adoption, and we're going to help facilitate it, because Doxime is primarily a video play where we don't collect patient data. We facilitate the doctor to patient video connection, similar to Zoom, but specifically for healthcare and for doctors. But there's some really interesting things we could do with video, because we have audio and video coming through our system, and we just facilitate that communication. But if we layered on AI to listen to the conversation and then to document or do a soap note or summary of the visit for the provider, that would be beneficial to them because doctors spend hours in a week writing summaries of their clinical visits. If we can do that for them, that would be a huge benefit. And we've talked to many providers about this, and they're like, "Oh, that'd be awesome! I would love that." And so those are the type of things that we're building. Or if AI listens to what something the patient is saying and says, "Hey, this person is expressing risk for depression or anxiety or even suicide," it could provide an alert to the provider and say, "Hey, this person needs something. They're at risk for this. We recommend X or Y." Or even if you're talking about some issue, heart disease or high blood pressure, the AI can listen to that and then provide a link to order a drug for that disease, or provide recommendations on how to treat that certain symptom that the patient is experiencing. So there's a lot of cool things like that we can layer on top of the video that's tailored specific for healthcare. That is really interesting. That's where the future of Doximy is going. But at the same time, it's not going to be disrupted overnight like some of the other industries are, like happen in some other industries. But it's something that we can build, and we can be part of that disruption in the healthcare space.
It's really interesting. It's amazing stuff that's going on in the background there. So, are there any other trends in the like marketplace that have grabbed your attention other than AI, or is it really AI that's driving factors at the moment?
In terms of technology, that's kind of that's dominating the conversation. One of the trends that's happening is actually movement away from telemedicine slightly. Before COVID, less than 10% of providers use telemedicine seriously. As a result of COVID, it shot up to 60 or 70%. And what's happened since the peak of COVID, people have been going back to in person, and that trend is starting to drop. But what's nice, and at least from what we're seeing, is that it's dropped off, but it's leveled off, and it's in the 30 to 40% range now, which is still way higher than it was pre-COVID. Still not as high as it was at the height of COVID, but healthcare has changed. But we have seen that trend back to in-person care, and it's stabilizing to a new steady state because there are patients who have tasted the ability to do care from home and are like, "I do not want to drive into the doctor. I don't want to find a babysitter for my kids. I don't want to deal with parking. I don't want to deal with waiting. I don't want to deal with sick patients in the waiting room. Can you just meet me by video? Because that is so much easier." And so patients have experienced that convenience, and they don't want it to go away. They want their doctor to keep doing that. Now, is telemedicine going to replace in-person care? Absolutely not. It's not going to. But in-person care complemented with telemedicine together, that provides a more complete, more convenient, more whole way of providing care to a patient. It's not just like, "No, patient, you have to get in here," and make it super inconvenient. You give that an option. If you want to come in, we can meet in person. If you want to do it by video, we can do that as well. And so that provides a greater set of options that providers can offer patients. And that's where we see telemedicine stabilizing within in-person care. It's a complement to it, augments in-person care, but it doesn't replace it. And we've always been a big advocate of that.
So you've talked about COVID quite a couple of times now, and your response to it. If there were to be another pandemic, would you be in the same situation that you are now, where you're going to have to respond really rapidly and quickly to that change, or are you in a better position now after the lessons that we've all learned from the first COVID?
Yeah, when COVID hit, it was a huge onslaught of people signing up. At one point, we had 32,000 providers sign up in a single day. Before COVID, we had 80,000 providers total all time. And so we were growing so fast, and we were able to handle it. And at that point, is one of those things, going back to that ship analogy, we were just hanging on for dear life. We strapped ourselves in and said, "Hopefully we don't capsize here." Fortunately, we didn't. We held on, and it stabilized, which was nice. But I think that there are, like, when you build a system, you build it for a certain amount of traffic. And when you add 30,000 providers a day, hundreds of thousands of people hitting your website at an instant at one time, that puts a huge amount of technical demand on your infrastructure that, fortunately for the most part, we came out unscathed. There was a couple times where we had outages because it was just crazy how many people were trying to get on at one single instance. But we quickly responded, added more servers, other ways to handle internet traffic to support that, and we survived it. I think if we got that same amount of traffic today, we wouldn't have those same outages. So in many ways, we did it. We survived. Could have been better, yes, but I think in the grand scheme of things, we did really well. And I don't want to discredit the hard work that our team and our company and our technology put in at that time. But we're certainly more prepared now. We have more people more prepared. We have better monitoring systems. And so, yeah, if we got a huge influx now, we'd be better prepared. But I think 10% better than we were back then because we were able to respond very well then.
Amazing. And you mentioned at the start of the call about Skype and other platforms. Do you view them as your competitors still? Or if they're not, who are your competitors and how do you differentiate yourself from them?
Yeah, what's interesting in the telemedicine space, in order to use video, it has to be HIPAA compliant. And that limits the number of video options available because some, like FaceTime, is not HIPAA compliant. So you can't use that, at least in the United States. Internationally, it's different. But, a few years ago, there were probably more competitors, but there's definitely a consolidation in the industry happening, especially in the telemedicine industry, around the main players. And the main players are Zoom and DoxyMe is what we're seeing. And so a lot of the small telemedicine companies are shutting down, going out of business, whatever. And so we're seeing a lot of those customers who are there come over to DoxyMe because they're like, well, hey, everybody else is using DoxyMe, so we're gonna come over there. Twilio is a big video tooling vendor that was providing WebRTC video for a number of companies in the telemedicine space, including the largest electronic health record, Epic, and they just announced that they're shutting down video. And so there's a lot of these major vendors that are kind of shutting down because it's kind of like that they're seeing that their numbers drop just like we are. We're able to sustain it because we have large numbers, high margins, whatever. So we're able to weather the storm. But some of the others who were running on venture capital or didn't have as large of user bases as us aren't able. They see the writing on the wall and they're just getting out now. And so we're seeing a consolidation happen in the telemedicine market. We're still signing up 400 to 500 providers every single day. And this is 4 years after COVID. And a lot of it is because they were using something else. It's being shut down or it's not meeting their needs anymore. And they're going to something else. So in terms of video vendors, it's DoxyMe and it's Zoom. There are a number of electronic health records that have built their own video. And so it's like, oh, I've got this electronic health record. They offer video. I'm just going to use that. And so that's also a competitor. But what's happening is that those products aren't able to keep up with innovation that we're able to bring out. So we're adding new features, new design, more workflows, more capabilities than video capabilities within an EHR can provide. And so you're seeing customers leave stick with their EHR, but not use that video product anymore and come over to something that's more fully featured like DoxyMe. And because it's just what they need.
Could you just outline some of your primary focal points and ongoing projects or endeavors?
Yeah, right now, so our biggest focus is, I mentioned rebuilding the platform for the future. Our old tech was built in 2015. And so it's an old tech. And we tried to build on it, build the features and capabilities that we want. And we realized it's just not going to work. We had to rebuild from the ground up, completely new infrastructure. We redesigned the user experience is the same, but they're redesigned interface so it looks nicer, more modern. And then we're building it in a way that's extensible, which means that we can add features and capabilities quickly. So within a couple of days, we can have an idea, take an idea, code it up, and deploy it on the DoxyMe platform in under a week, which is amazing. Before, in the old tech, it would have taken months and things would have broke. It wasn't built for it. Now the new platform is built for scale. And so that's our major initiative right now is re-platforming, which if anybody who's gone through re-platforming knows it's 3 times as long and 3 times as expensive as you as your worst case scenario. And that's definitely the case with us. And so, but we've got a lot of smart, great people working on it. And that's our number one focus. I mean, there's AI, there's all these other things, and it's easy to get distracted by the shiny objects coming. But you have to stay focused on what is the most important thing right now. And the most important thing for us right now is to re-platform, because that will enable us to go after those shiny objects a lot faster than we can now. And so sometimes you have to make the trade-off and the sacrifice. You have a customer that's like, hey, I want this feature. And if I don't get this feature, I'm leaving. And we say, look, to build that feature, it's going to take 3 months, or you can wait 9 months when our platform's done and we can build it then. And, sometimes you might have to lose a customer here or there, but for the long-term gain, which is be able to build it, it's stable, securely, that is extensible for the future. And we're playing the long game. So we're looking out 10, 15 years about what do we need? Where's healthcare going to be in 10 years from now? And what do we need to do now in order to build for that? And that's guiding our decisions right now. And we know it's short term. We're making sacrifices in the short term to enable that long-term gain. And that's, sometimes it's hard trade-offs, but it's necessary. And those are the tough decisions that as a leader we have to make sometimes.
And we were talking earlier before we started the podcast about your international operations. Is it hard to manage different operations when they're like scattered over different parts of the world? Is that something that's is really exciting for you? Is that something that's going out more out of necessity?
We have about half of our employees in the US, the other half are in the EU/UK, and quarter in the UK and the other quarter around EU. Most of our engineering, design, and tech talent is based in the EU, and our chief technology officer and chief product officer are also based in the EU. And so they are there working and building in the EU on their time zone. The US is primarily focused with sales, customer support, and we do have a couple product people here and there, but it's a lot more customer focused in the US, and it's a lot more tech focused in the EU. Because of that makes it a little bit easier, because it's really like, they're kind of co-located close to each other in the same time. We have a couple hubs, but we don't really have true offices where people come in. We have like a co-working space. We have a couple co-working spaces that we meet with and gather. And so the teams that work together are mostly co-located, but we do have some crossover where you have somebody in Mountain Time Zone in the US meeting with somebody in Ukraine, which is like a 9-hour difference. And that's annoying, but that's more the exception rather than the norm. One of the biggest challenges, though, is as everybody's working from home in our company, building that kind of team unity and kind of that collaborative, like, hey, let's get together and meet and talk about this, is a little bit harder because people kind of stay in their computers and don't ask questions. But if, Jack, the guy you're working with, is sitting next to you, can just reach over and, hey, help me with this issue right here. That doesn't happen. And people might be a little shy to reach out sometimes. And so, we try to do things where we have gatherings in our hubs. And so once a month we have a gathering in London, and I'm in Charleston. We get together about once a month. And so the different locations we gather, every couple of weeks. And it's very healthy and helpful when we do gather at those times, and everybody loves it. But we find that it's just trying to balance that. Hey, we're going to work from home. It's convenient. You don't have to drive. You get to, spend more time with your family because you're not commuting and stuff like that. But the trade-off is you get less of this like cross-pollination and serendipitous run-ins that kind of help come up with ideas and stuff. And so we try to compensate with that other ways. All of our calls, we don't do phone calls. It's all video. We're a video platform, so we use it. And so we try to compensate with more meetings. And I end up traveling quite a bit, and a lot of our leaders end up traveling quite a bit. So I'm over in Europe once or twice a year, meeting with the team. I try to do one-on-ones with every person in the company once a year so I can have a connection there. It's definitely an investment of time, but there's some really incredible people in the company, and I wouldn't have known that if I didn't get a chance to meet them. And it also provides an opportunity. Folks in the company, they're working, they want to, and oftentimes, which is funny for me, the employees like look up to the CEO, is like, oh my gosh, it's a CEO. He's like untouchable. And I'm just like, I'm just a normal dude. Like, I just want to like hang out and talk about whatever. And so, and that's what I try to do in these one-on-ones with the employees, and to build that connection. And as I've done it, it's kind of taken down that aura of like, oh, he's untouchable, he's just a normal guy. And it creates a greater connection between the employee and me. And as I've been doing this, we've seen our employee net promoter score go up, our ENPS, because there's less of this like, oh, the CEO doesn't know what he's talking about, he's up in his high tower. Like, no, I'm just a normal guy. Let's talk about whatever issues you're facing. And as a result, we've seen less negative scores towards leadership and a more embracing the company vision and strategy at a higher level. And so it's a small investment of time, but we're seeing it pay dividends, and it's definitely worth the effort.
Great, lovely to hear. Unfortunately, we are coming towards the end of the podcast, but just before we go, could you give us some advice to any aspiring entrepreneurs out there who might be thinking about starting their own company?
Yeah. So advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. I started, this isn't my first company I started one before I went back and did my PhD, and I finished my master's degree, and I was like, oh, I'm going to create this technology that helps people track diseases that run in their family. It's called itrunsonmyfamily.com. And I got some angel investment from a family member, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I hired a company that was going to build it. And I was like, okay, great. I've got this amount of money. It's going to take this much to build. I'll be done in 3 months. I'll be able to start selling it, and I'll be making money in a couple months. Did not go as planned, right? So it took way longer to build. It went way over budget. And when it was finally built, it still wasn't good enough to sell, and people wouldn't buy it. And so, and at that time, I'd given up everything, and I was like living in my parents' garage without a job, any income. And it was just kind of like, it was kind of humiliating, because it's like, man, that did not work out as planned, and I've got nothing to show for it. And so fortunately, I was able to land a job in the field, and I was able to, get more experience. But when I started Doxime, I was a student doing my PhD, and I graduated. I said, I'm not going to go through that again. I mean, this is a great idea, and I believe in it, but the chances are that it's successful and enough time for me to support myself and my family is just not going to be there. And so I went and got a job working in the medical university, and I did this on the side. And for the first 6 years, I didn't make any money off of Doxime. And for the first 4 years, the company didn't really make money. We were kind of living off of debt and barely getting by. And even if we we did get some angel investment at the beginning to help it grow, and it still took 4 years before we saw positive cash flow. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs say, oh, I got to go all in and do this, and they go get venture funding and blow through that venture funding and are not much further along than I would have been by just bootstrapping it, working the job, and this being my side hustle. And so I think it's better to have, personally, I would say, get a job that pays the bills, and then do this on the side with some friends who are also working full time, and you can manage. And we kind of did. And so and as a result, we now have 100% ownership of the company. We don't have any outside investors, no venture capitalists, no private equity firms that own big chunks of it. We own 100%, and that was worth the patience. And I think a lot of it, has to do with patience. If you can do it, startups always take longer and are more expensive than you think. And you don't have to just get some good partners who share that same vision with you, and you can pay them a little bit lesser, but pay them with equity. And so that when it does finally get traction in the market, you guys are able to pay yourselves and to grow, and then you just keep more equity for yourselves. And so doing a startup is high risk of failure. And so this is a way, but high reward if it can work out. And by having something that's stable, that pays the bills, allows you to take that risk for longer than to quickly fail and then be out of it, and not really give your idea enough time to really develop and nurture. And growing a successful business is like a plant. You can't force it to grow faster. You just have to nurture it and give it the nutrients and water and sun that it needs, and let it grow at its pace. And sometimes, especially in healthcare, that does take longer than you hope. But fortunately, we were patient enough, and with for us the luck of a worldwide pandemic that forced people to use telemedicine to really help us push us over the hump of the startup.
Amazing advice. It sounds like patience is the key. Brandon, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That was Brandon Welch, founder and CEO of DoxyMe.